Okay. People who've seen me speak before know I'm very interactive. That's probably why Mike made you come to the front. All of you watched Krishna. How many of you could see the slides behind him so you could take pictures? Okay, so 4 or 5 people. Okay. So I'm not going to stand up. I'm going to sit down. Hope you guys are okay with being intimate. I did have a long morning. It was great. I burnt my shirt. I had no electricity, so my hair is a little disheveled, and a homeless woman tried to fight me. And that's okay, because I'm here. Patrick was like, "Are you going to be late?" And I was like, "Maybe, but I'll be there." Since, Mike told me I should tell you guys. All right, so there we go. Part of what I want to talk about is the fact that we as SEOs know that AI is encroaching into our space a little bit. Last year we were scared. This year we're empowered and not, because people like Krishna just told us we're all keeping our jobs because AI can't do its job without the index. And who built the index? We did. Everybody in the room did, right? So it stands to reason that we need to better understand how they're doing their jobs with our jobs. I'm going to tell you now that I have a video in here that's not going to play, and it's going to be okay. I'll walk you through it. But one of the things that I really believe is that we have to experiment a lot. So this is going to be a lot about experimentation. And the reason being is because I believe in crawlers. Mike talked about this. Everybody who's heard me talk, I talk about log files and crawlers. There's not much difference in how search is being crawled related to how AI crawlers are working. But how many of us know anything about that, right? It's a black box. That's not supposed to happen. That's okay. I am going to talk about anime. How many people in the room know what Dr. Stone is? Wow. Okay. There's only 6 of my friends here. That's okay. I'm going to give you guys some context because I'm not going to just storytell and do things without you knowing what I'm talking about. So Dr. Stone is awesome because Dr. Stone is set in the future, but the future collapses, right? Everybody gets petrified into stone. That's why it's called Dr. Stone. And so Senku, the guy with the green hair, wakes up 3,700 years later, and everybody's petrified, right? It's the stone world. We have to start over again. Sound like anything we got to do right now? Yeah, that's why I picked this one. It has a lot of context related to what we're doing. We feel like we have to start over a little bit. So, what does Senku do? Senku takes all of the knowledge that he has from his father, who is a doctor and an astronaut, and he says, I'm going to rebuild society. I'm going to rebuild and do these things. So I'm going to talk about a few things, right? SEO used to be sorcery. Now it's not. It's not the magic anymore. We know what to do. We're disciplined. It's got rules. LLMs, not so much. But we know science, just like Senku, so we can rebuild. We experiment a lot. Senku, in order to reestablish society, doesn't have anything. This is, again, the stone world. There's no tools. There's no search console. He's got to go from the ground up. So what does he have to do? He's got to experiment. He's got to figure things back out to make things right. He takes those results and the findings, and he rebuilds society in a world of science. It's kind of what we keep talking about with AI, right? The future of science. So one thing we have to do as a team is we can assume nothing as SEOs. We're the most equipped to do this job. It's encroaching in our space, but we can assume nothing. As SEOs, we got to assume everything. Once Google started helping us and once we had a voice, we could establish the boundaries. We knew what was going on. Now, we got to test everything, and that's okay. When I say test everything, I literally mean everything, because that's what this whole thing's going to be about. I got caught up in the fact that I didn't understand how these crawlers were working because I'm obsessed with crawlers. And so I started doing a bunch of tests, a bunch of parallel tests. So I'm going to go through how I ran through some of those tests, because what I realized is we've gotten dated in our ability to test. When you know what's going to happen, when you know how to optimize the content, when you know how the crawler crawls your website, when you have Search Console tell you the thing that is broken, you know what to fix. You know the forward path. How do you identify the forward path if you don't know how to test into it? So that's what we're going to talk about. Log files still don't lie. They're still always right. So here's my new kind of mantra of self. I will listen to any hypothesis, but on one condition, that you show me a method by which it can be tested. The reason this is my new mantra is because August was one of the very first scientists for organic chemistry. Did anybody take organic chemistry in high school? Did anybody like it? College? You did it in college?
No, high school seemed a little early.
What?
We didn't have it, I guess, at my high school.
Mike said I was smart. Gosh. No, I'm joking. But we did have, AP Chem in my school. So here's the thing. I think scientists are awesome. I think search people are scientists. So I'm resetting my mindset and thinking, let's be like scientists and test everything. But we have to test it right. We have to set up structured plans, and that's something we've gotten out of doing. So I set up an experiment related to my anime. I set up 2 festivals. They're not real, but they are real websites. I set up my own droplets so that I could manage and review the logs real time, live. That's the video you guys are gonna miss. It's okay. I'll tell you about it. But we have JoriCon and Jori Fest, okay? JoriCon and Jori Fest are held at different times because everybody who's an anime geek knows you got to go to all the festivals. So they sequence them so that they can take all your money while you do cosplay. So what I did was I started with one concept with JoriCon and Jori Fest. I thought, what if I differentiate them just slightly so I can figure out one thing. And the one thing that I wanted to understand that Krishna already answered, so I'm a little upset because, he stole my thunder, was how is structured data going to be used on the page, right? As an SEO, I already knew how it was being crawled. I already knew fast ways to get it injected in there. I knew that I could put JSON LD on the page. I could route it. I could open things up. I could do whatever I wanted to do. And then I put it on pages and things didn't happen with AI and I didn't show up in search and I was like, why is this happening to me? So I went to where I thought was best, the log files. And then I realized I didn't understand that either. So I was like, I'm gonna do a micro test, JoriCon and Jori Fest. And here's how I set it up. I think that routing would work, meaning I'm gonna point the crawler to where I want it to go. But I was like, I can't just prove I'm right to everybody. I have to prove that it's actually right. So I went with what most people do, right? You go with the method that suits you. When schema markup first came out, some of you were working on enterprise pages, and guess what? You couldn't just inject JSON LD. You didn't have developer resources. So you're like, I'm gonna mark up that page myself. So you had inline markup, and that was okay, right? Some of you had dev resources, and they were like, you can't touch the page, we're not going to let you. So you did have to stuff the JSON LD in there. And some people had nothing. So you just wrote the page and prayed. That's what my whole concept was here. 1, embedded. 2, raw endpoint. 3, I'm gonna point it and tell it what I want it to do. That's that slide. It's not playing. It's okay. So what it went through was real-time log streaming, okay? And the reason I set up real-time log streaming was because I really wanted to understand how's it accessing the page? How's it accessing the information on the page? Is it gonna do what I tell it to do? Because I thought the routing was gonna win, right? And so here what you'll see is I sent it to the page, and we're only talking about RAG, by the way. I am not talking about training bots. The reason I'm not talking about training bots is because you can't actually force them to do what you want them to do. So you can't really study them. But RAG bots, you can. So that's when I tell you guys set up experiments, do it with RAG. You can actually force it to go visit your information and see what's going on. So that's what I did. And I used ChatGPT and Claude because Perplexity follows kind of the same, sentiment. And I excluded Google. I know, everybody's shuddering like, oh my God, you excluded Google. But again, we already know what Google's grounded in. We already know that it's going to use the index. So we know how to get in. So we don't have to worry about that as much. We have to worry about some of the new information because Google also wants to pace with these people, these companies. And so they may make changes related to the changes that happen into the industry and the environment. So I told ChatGPT to go visit an explicit page, and it was so that I could win. I sent it to the routing page. And you want to know what I thought it was going to do? Go to my route, ingest my endpoint, and give me structured data back. And it gave me really great structured information. But you want to know what it told me? It didn't use my route. It skipped over my route. I failed. I didn't do what I wanted to do. And you can see right there, that's ChatGPT user. That's the bot most of you know about. The other thing that you will find out when you get to view the logs, that was part of the video, is that you're going to get a stream of the consciousness of how the bot is trying to access your information. Some of what you would have seen is that even though it started off as ChatGPT user, then it started to spoof different mobile devices. On top of that, it didn't just spoof mobile devices. It came and it tried to access my index pages. It tried to find out if I was a WordPress site. Okay, so it put in a WordPress path and a configuration just to see if that's how I set the pages up. So it's not dumb, it's smart. It's looking at how we standardize content. You know how they say, hey, ChatGPT seems to prefer blogs. Wouldn't it make sense that I try to figure out if I am one? Okay, so I failed, but in failure, we learn things. So I thought it would handle the route. It didn't. What I found out was it wanted to be very efficient. I had modeled it into the page and nested it already. So it captured it very quickly. One of the things, though, that I also realized was that Claude did the same thing. Who said that? We have to start over. You're right. So I'm like, that was perfect. So I'm going to walk you through some of the additional testing that I did. But here's the thing. We're going to test the crap out of things, and we're going to fail. I wasn't disappointed in my failure. I wasn't afraid to share with you guys that I failed, because in my failure, I learned. And that's what we're going to be doing rapidly. So I set up a bunch of tests. When I talk about a bunch of tests, I set up like 10. I ran them in parallel, and I ran them 5 times each, because I really wanted to understand, was I going to get the right results each time, or were things going to change? I don't know how many of you have seen like Mike Talk or Dan Petrovich, but what you'll see is they'll say, real time, everybody take out their phone, search this thing. How many of you got the same result? And nobody ever got it. And I was like, why is that? That's so crazy. Or you look online and you read somebody else's stuff, and they're like, again, all of these really smart agents can't get the right answer about what's going on right now, or what's happening in 2 days or in the future. I wanted to understand why that was happening. So I set up a bunch of different tests, right? The routing fails, but then I set up an accuracy floor. I wanted to understand, how accurate am I going to be when it comes to basic information versus complex information? All right, so Jori Fest and JoriCon, if you visit them, they're very, very basic. All right, this is not a scaled attempt. This is to teach you guys how to test internally. So you go back to your agencies, you go back to the bigger companies that you work in, and you have a point of validation so that when somebody says, well, how do you know this is right? You can go, I ran a test on it, these are the results, and this is why. And you start it up small, and then you expand and get bigger. So here are the things that I thought. Bots are dumb. They're going to struggle because they're LLMs, because they can't get information right now. I wasn't right on that. Other things, right? The bot's going to retrieve all the information, and it's going to be perfect. That was actually pretty accurate. The more simplified the information was, the better. The more structured it is, it gets everything. So Krishna said something earlier that was spot on, and I was like, thank you, God, he set me up for success. I wanted to understand, now that it ingested my structured data and it got everything perfectly, it did it from the flat structure, it did it from the nested JSON, but when I sent it to the route directly, it got the same information. So I knew that structure was going to get adopted no matter what. But here's the context. If your content is very simple and flat, it will reason that out on its own. The more complicated the information gets, the harder it gets for it to reason. So it stands to reason. More structure means more reasonable. So structured data for me was not about whether or not it was going to get the information or the context to the information. It's whether or not it can reason with that information, right? When you have context clues, you can make better assumptions. When it read the flat information, I couldn't ask it complicated questions like, which one's cheaper for me to go to at this time point, Jori Fest or Jori Con? Because when it was reading the flat files, it couldn't reason the dates, the cost, and the structure.
Can you explain the flat file? Sorry.
The flat file was just straight up text. So I just wrote it in a block file, like a paragraph, where I was like, Jori Con is blah, 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 one big sentence. That's a good question. Okay. The other times, though, when I got more complicated, I realized it started skipping that information. It would only crawl back to the JSON. And the reason this was important is because each time I asked the question, it had to go visit the site, okay? Because it was RAG and because it wasn't indexed. So it had no grounding or bearing. So I had to feed it. When Krishna said if it's not indexed, it will not find it, part of one of the tests was, I'm just going to ask it about JoriCon and Jori Fest because I know they're real. I did not give it a URL. It said, I'm sorry, I can't find it. It then went logically to try and search the index for it. Couldn't find it because it was a new site and because I blocked Google. So when I fed it the URL, it got the information I wanted. I could see the log files running, and I could see how it was processing the information. So structured data is for logic. If you want it to understand the page and use that information to answer correctly, use structured data. So then I got into, how do I understand how they find things, right? The discovery aspect of it. This is more the stone world again, right? Because if they're starting from scratch and there's nothing, Krishna said everything was about freshness, newness. How do you take something new that's unindexed and make sure that it's in an answer engine that needs indexed information? That was a good question, right? And I figured it out. You got to feed it, okay? So part of the feeding it was giving it the URL. The next thing it did was it switched over to the training bot. That was my aha moment. So you can actually feed the URL in, ask it to process that information. The more structured the information and the more clear the information, the more it trusts you. Krishna said earlier, you need trust. Once it trusted me, it came back and tried to train on me, okay? That is what's really interesting because many of us are trying to figure out, how do we get into the training data set? It's got to trust you, you got to be fresh, but you can feed the engine, okay? So once I started figuring these things out and showing how discovery would work, I wanted to understand bias because I had fed it information, and we all know that it caches some of the information, so how much context bias was there? And there was a lot, okay? Within your session, it's continuing to store that information. So after I fed it the URL, I could keep asking it about Jori Fest, and it would keep going to the URL to fetch the information for me. So I understood that part was great, but here was the kicker. If it fetched the flat file first, where it didn't structure the information, because it's lazy, because it was trying to be efficient, it used that information, so it got dumber. Because then it couldn't logically answer me. So it mattered whether or not the first touch of the information it ingested from me was structured or not. I couldn't add the structure in later because it had already started its session. It had already stored the information. The reason I'm telling you about context bias, though, is because a lot of the tools that you guys want to use bias in them, right? They've already sent out the queer out Fanny. They already pulled it back in. You are going to go back, and some people will ask you, they'll say, well, I searched in ChatGPT for that thing you told me about yesterday, Bob, generic Bob, but I searched for it, and I didn't get the same response you got, and it's because of context bias. When you go back to your teams, you need to make sure you're clearing that session out, using fresh information for your experiments so that you can come back with responsible answers. So just understand that context bias is real. The reason I'm telling you guys this too is that it's real in the instance that I tested it. I had somebody else, a friend of mine, test it in a local environment. When I say local, I mean for local location pages, because that's not something that a lot of people have thought about yet with AI and answer engines, is location-based things where trust really, really matters. Like your dentists, your doctors. How many people are trusting AI to answer their questions for their medical health? Anybody here? One person, two, right? We don't trust a chatbot to tell us about our health. So would you trust it when it recommends a doctor for you? See, there's half nods here. So some of you would actually trust it on a recommendation for a doctor, but not to answer for a doctor. So that's the thing. You got to figure out how to wait for the train so that you can keep talking. So these are things that you really have to think about in your experimentation. So now we're going to get to the stuff that I like, the crawling, right? So I figure all these things out because I'm running through all these tests. And I have this moment where I think about a previous talk that I did about crawl budgets, right? I know everything about crawl budgets. I actually, I praise myself on this. If you think that you don't get I got 5 minutes. Damn it, that timer's not up. That's okay. So if you think you want to know more about crawl budget, contact me. If you want to understand more about LLMs, though, it's different. It's about appetite because everything is about efficiency. If you're hungry, right? Something tastes good in the mouth. You want more of it. So you go diving deeper into the meal. The more savory the meal is, the more you ingest and eat it. That's like the LLMs. So you give that first little taste and it likes it, it's going all in. That's why the training bot comes. If it's not a good taste, if it's not that great, if it's not structured, it doesn't actually have a raw appetite for it. The reason I say this is that I started making things more difficult for the bot. After it liked my information, I reconstructed it into chunks of depth. And this is where the chunking comes in, right? How can you hop deeper? Well, you can't. You've heard a lot of people say things like condense it all into one page, but chunk it out and make it really smart, but depth matters. Depth does matter, and when we're talking depth, we're not talking about spreading across deeply. We're talking about one big page of deep information because the bot is so lazy that after it gets about 3 pages deep, it doesn't want to do it anymore. It's too much. And the reason the RAG bot does this is because we're lazy. How long are you going to wait for an answer? Google, we don't wait more than less than 2 seconds, right? You're like, no answer, I'm done. ChatGPT, Claude, all of them have started to realize this. So when they think about things, they're creating appetite for your results because if it's got to be fresh, if it's got to be new, and they've got to figure out which things to train on, they need the freshest, fastest, newest information that's easy for them to get a lot of all at once. Okay, so remember that. So here's the important part that I can get through in 5 minutes. Here are the things I figured out. Efficiency beats format, right? Be more efficient, get it in there, get it structured, because it's only going to visit you one good time, and you got that one good moment. Retrieval appetite. Make it dense in the first page. If that's where you're going to point them to the best junk you got, all right? Create a canary page. Create a page just for them so that you can see what happens, create that experiment, and understand how deeply they're going to go into that information. And if you can't satisfy them, then create another page. But don't do it till they're satisfied. Don't do it till you're satisfied with the answer. Context bias overrides architecture. It's real. So make sure you're starting fresh each time and understand how your answer is going to be responded to. Structure enables reasoning every single time. Do not release pages that do not have structured data. It matters way more than you think. It cannot answer responsibly because you're not structuring the information for it to use the reasoning logic. Session throttling exists. That's what I mean about the page depth. The session matters. The deeper you make them go into the session, the slower and dumber they get. So how do you use that information? Optimize for the appetite. This is a crossover. We already optimize for efficiency and speed on our pages, right, as SEOs. You keep hearing other experts say there's a lot of overlap. It's not about that there's a lot of overlap. It's how you strategize using those tactics with that overlap. We all know we need to make pages efficient. Make the best pages that you want the answers to come from the most efficient. That's where you need to focus. Schema is the API for the logic. Don't leave it out. It always needs to be there now. It's not a question of if it does or does not work. Krishna just said it, and I'm telling you that the tests prove it. They will be done without your schema markup, so do it. I got a woohoo from Martha, yes. Embed, don't link. I'm going to tell you this is from my test. Test it yourselves, because here's what my hypothesis is for the future. The more dense your information is, and the more, beautiful, right? Oh, I thought you were giving me a time check. The more you may have to actually structure it and make it lighter weight using an endpoint. So for lightweight content, embed. For deeper content, you may actually still need to do a routing test and see if it works. The clean beaker test, that's just make sure everything's clean each time you're talking to your colleagues. And then the no index danger zone. If it's not indexed, it's not real for training data, and it's not real for RAG. You can send it there, but after that, it's still going to try and store. If you're non-indexable, it can't store your information, it cannot answer for you. So I like that 92% of the time for my tests, I was right. But like I told you, I like to fail too because you learn from it. I want you guys to set up tests where you're assuming failure. Learn from the failures, celebrate them. Micro tests matter. You guys are all the testers for AI and AI answers. Make sure you own this in your organizations because there should not be a new role for AI. SEOs should be adopting this because we are the most suited to do the job. Don't forget it, test it, learn it, own it, and share it because we don't know what we don't know. Okay? Thank you.